Hello and welcome to another episode of How Are You Holding Up? A mental health podcast by the depressed for the depressed. I'm Lindsey.
And I'm Chris.
And the first question I want to ask is, Chris, how are you holding up?
Yeah.
Last time the listeners heard us, we were rageful and exhausted in a small cubby in the office.
Yeah. Now I am rageful and exhausted in our normal recording space.
Yes.
So not a whole lot has changed for me. I still feel pretty dead inside, mentally, physically, and emotionally. I have had 2 days off now, which has been great, but now I feel like I've wasted my time.
Naturally.
So, you know, it's a good place to be. Linz, how are you holding up?
I had a really rough month. I think a lot of things compounded onto one another, and I've been practicing living in the moment as much as possible instead of dwelling on the past. But I have had a lot of anger, funny enough, this last week. So, you know, sometimes you just go with it and you cry in your car at lunchtime, you know?
Yep.
But I'm really lucky to have a supportive family. And I got some good sleeps.
Good.
And I got some good eats. And I am...
Love that show.
hoping that this week is better. This episode is brought to you by one of our lovely listeners.
Thank you.
Thank you. Today we are going to be talking about...
Hopelessness.
And worthlessness.
Yes.
So, you know, are you feeling defeated, defective, deserted, deprived?
D words.
Depression!
Yay! Yes. This is something that I have felt more and more, and this is something that I feel is kind of in line a bit with people 30 and younger.
I think all over the map, honestly. But yes, a lot of our generation is suffering.
Yes, we are feeling a lot of the hopelessness, a lot of powerlessness.
Yes.
There is definitely a lot of frustration that comes with that. There's also just, even on a smaller scale, a lot of us can just feel hopeless in whatever it is that we are striving to accomplish.
Yeah, I've definitely ranged, and I think a lot of us do this, from, you know, the feeling of what's the point, we're all going to die, and where you really feel that, like, to your core, like, I could die any day. It doesn't matter at all. And then once I'm dead, my whole life won't matter, and none of it matters, and everything's terrible, and there is no God.
We believe in nothing, Lebowski, if you're nihilists. Yeah, no, that's very much like, there is something, I mean, it's strangely cathartic at times when you embrace that feeling of nothingness, and how
it can be.
There's worth. The problem is there is worth in the life that we are living. So
yes, there are far-reaching positive and negative consequences of everything. We don't know what they are all the time. You know, fortunately, this podcast for me has been something that I was pretty hopeless that it, you know, with everything in general. I'm a very negative person. I think I expect the worst, hope for the best, but I don't really usually hope much. And I didn't think this podcast would probably go very long. I didn't know. I hoped, you know, but I didn't figure many people would listen. And to have actual results and see people saying nice things and seeing the views and listens, etc., has been a good token for me to remind myself this is applicable to other parts of my life, even if I don't see the results every time.
Absolutely. And that's kind of, that's something that I have also struggled with. I mean, we've both been involved in projects that we've both been very enthusiastic about, and then starting them and actually executing them, well, they're two different things.
Yeah.
You get a really big burst at the front end, and then as things goes on, no, not so much, and then it slowly dies. So this has been a lovely change of pace. But for me, my hopelessness kind of is more inspired by my own self-development, where I get into a rut and I feel like nothing I'm doing is actually improving my life, or worse, I'm taking the steps to improve my life and I'm seeing no results for them. These are tried and true methods of being hopeless by the end of it. The moment that you stop seeing progress in anything that you're working on, it can often lead to a feeling of, well, what the fuck am I doing this for?
I think especially, then there's so many levels of this, especially if you're, for example, somebody who has a hard time with relationships. And you're like, well, I'm just not going to date. And you don't date for a while. And then you start feeling good about yourself. And you're doing well. And you feel like, I'd like to have that special connection with somebody. And you start dating again. And then something happens that's really negative, like you get ghosted, or you try for a while and the person is terrible and you break up. And you're like, well, what the heck was even the point? This is just proof that I shouldn't. And then instead of seeing like, I'm so proud of myself for having gone out and tried something new and met somebody new. And I had some great memories. And it's really hard to retain that feeling of great gratitude.
Yeah.
You just kind of slip back into hopelessness. And I think it is something that is you start practicing it and it becomes a cycle.
I mean, it does couple in that same example. It does couple also with the feeling of worthlessness.
Yes.
Which we've touched on a bit on our self-esteem, self-worth episodes.
Yeah, but it always is worth a little mention, I think.
Agreed.
Because it's something that I think we've all... It's really easy to fall into that with depression because, as my sister put it, depression is a liar and it will lie to you and you believe those lies because it just feels so absolutely true.
Yes.
It just feels absolutely like for a fact you are worthless. For a fact you don't. And that's why I think sometimes people experience the, oh gosh, we had an episode on where you don't feel like you belong where you are.
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah. It just ties into that. So it's so hard to even enjoy the positive things in your life if you at a base level feel like you're worthless.
It is kind of amazing when you do feel that amount of worthlessness, because like when you get to a point of feeling hopeless and worthless, and gonna talk about suicidal thoughts for a minute, so trigger warning, guys. You find a comfort in the idea of the end, of there being an end to that feeling, whether it is through horrendous means or whether it's something that you actually see change. You see the positivity, you see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's actually something that helps you and it's something that's benefiting you. You can eventually break through those hopeless, worthless thoughts. And you get to a point where you actually do accept these things as coming to you. You deserve them because you've worked your ass off for them. It doesn't feel like it's real, though.
I think that the not real feeling is a big part of it. Yeah, and I know that many of us have used the negative self-talk of also just like suicide being like a punishment for yourself, like you imagining doing it, whatnot. And you do need help sometimes to break these patterns of thought. Yes. These negative, totally toxic things. You don't even realize how many times a day you're telling yourself you're trash. And once you believe that, you see that proof in everything, and then you ignore all the evidence to the contrary. So if, someone looks at you and says, God, you are so smart, and I just love being around you. You're like, ew, God, why are you saying this to me? That's not true at all. Or like, God, you are just so beautiful. It's like, ugh, stop. Or you're so talented. I mean, I know so many people who cannot take a compliment because it's too painful almost. Like, you just don't believe it. Don't lie to me.
Yeah, don't fucking lie to me.
Like, what are you trying to get from me? What do you want?
Don't lie to yourself like that. That's rude. Like, moments of that, I've been in on both sides of that. Yeah. Where I've been the one being like, you're full of shit when you tell yourself you're worthless, right? And I've also been the one saying, no, you're full of shit from not thinking that I'm worthless.
And that's why there's cognitive therapy is really cool in that way. One of the things I remember reading about is give yourself time to have those negative thoughts. So sit down put a timer on 10, 15 minutes and write down your negative thoughts. Just write them down. Write down everything. Like I'm all of it. And then once that time's up, you're not allowed to do that anymore.
Yep.
And once they come into your mind, because they will, you turn it around. And you think of something that you love about yourself. And that will not feel comfortable.
No.
And it will not feel pleasant. But actually, after a while, you start to believe those things. And you start to feel like it is true. And it helps.
One of the first things that my therapist told me to do was I had to spend time and write down 50 things I liked about myself.
Oh, that's a lot. My therapist did not make me do 50.
Well, that was the best part. Was I was like, so you've got some pretty high expectations here, and he was like, do 10.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that's a manageable number.
I struggled even, I think, in the beginning to find 10 things about myself. It was a very uncomfortable process.
I absolutely hated it. I was sitting there like, okay, they have to be things I like about myself, not things that I like about others liking about myself.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's really funny. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Because I was trying to see the difference of like, well, so-and-so likes me because I'm funny, or so-and-so likes me because I'm this or that.
And what do you actually like
what
about
do I
yourself?
actually believe about myself? And I had to sit there and just go, okay, I'm just going to turn off the negative thoughts in my head for a little bit and actually sit there and just go, I think I'm funny. I think I'm intelligent. And it's like, ugh, this feels so gross. I hate, it's so self-indulgent, but it's not. I have this list now of me believing what I've written down and actively going, I believe this about myself.
And the funny thing is, some people who've never experienced depression, never experienced abuse, they truly feel and think those things about themselves and other people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know what it's like. And so when I talk to somebody who's like not experienced those things and they hear me say like, hey, guess what? These are the deepest, darkest feelings and thoughts that I'm having. And they're like, oh my God, why do you think those are terrible? And so it's just, and I had forgotten, when you're with this for so long and as long as I've been dealing with it, it's just like, it's just so natural. It is. And that's the big thing is once it becomes natural, your natural state to be hopeless and feel worthless, that's when sometimes like the whole, just think happy thoughts. It's not going to be enough for you. You're going to need to get a therapist. You're going to need to make some real life changes. And that might have to look like radical self-love. Even if you don't feel it, that whole like feeling love and love isn't real. Well, maybe just acting on love as an action, thinking of love as an action and having radical self-love for yourself. And like, I don't have 10, 15 minutes to sit down and yes, you do. Yes, you do. You have 10, 15 minutes to sit down and write down your negative thoughts.
You absolutely do.
And guess what? You're not worthless.
No.
Forget about anybody caring or not caring about you. You yourself has so much power to do so many incredible things. And you might not feel like you do, but that doesn't mean that you can't. Like, there's a saying, and it's kind of shitty, and you guys might hate it. I kind of hate it, but it also makes sense. It's cope, don't mope.
Oh my God.
And this could be a whole discussion. I know a lot of people are like, listen, depression, you're not moping. But go with me for a second. I know I do this where I sit and I feel really sorry for myself for almost too long. And then I like... then I start thinking about thoughts that make me feel worse. And I just totally saturate myself in it. And that's where it becomes, I think, a little mopey.
Yeah, when you've decided that you're... Okay, let's play in my space now. Where you actively decide to describe yourself and go, who am I? Well, I'm a depressed person. Or I'm an anxious person.
Yeah.
You've not only accepted that what you are afflicted by is part of your personage, you've basically created it as a character trait of yourself.
And for a long time, I was like, well, I'm a depressed person.
Yeah.
And it's something that doesn't have to be, so this is practicing hopeful things, hopeful thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
You might not be depressed forever.
Yeah.
This will most likely be something that is temporary. And yes, someday you may fall back into it.
Sure.
But you won't be like this forever. Nothing is. We're always in a state of change.
Yep. If you could sit down and have a conversation with yourself 10 years ago, you'd be talking to a completely different person than if you were to talk to yourself right now or 10 years from now.
That's true. So we've kind of skipped around all over the place here.
Yeah.
Let's focus back on self-esteem and self-worth. You really get you're good at describing this. So the difference between...
So self-esteem is more along the lines of what you believe yourself to be. Whether that is, I'm a good person, I'm loved by, I have a loving family, you know, blah, 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 blah. Self-worth is how much you actually, like, put stock in that. Whether or not you actually believe that you are a loving, good person, versus the things that you believe about yourself. So, having that self-worth is infinitely more important than anything. The self-esteem, though, you can't really have without it. So, having hit both of those targets, and we have a whole episode on it. So.
Yes, please listen to it. It actually was really interesting for me to learn the difference because I didn't really know the difference.
Yeah, because it's usually like lumped together and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're not going to go back into it. Just go back, listen to the episode. It's worth it. But it does tie in to that feeling of hopelessness as well.
Like, how deep does the pit of your despair go really can depend on how good your self-worth is or not.
Yes. For me, I have abysmal self-worth. I have uncharacteristically high self-esteem for the amount of self-worth that I have. Because I do feel like I am capable of doing a whole bunch of shit. Do I feel like I'm actually going to succeed at some of these things? Fuck the hell no. So, as a result, I typically will go into something feeling like no matter what I'm doing, it is going to end disastrously, or that it's not going to last forever, and this temporary happiness is just that, temporary, and there's no point on me continuing it if it's not going to last forever.
Isn't it funny that you'll focus on the temporary of your happiness, but not the temporariness of your sadness?
Yeah. It's a fun mental gymnastic that I do with myself, because I also freely recognize how stupid that is. It's disastrous. It's really, really disastrous when you fall into that headspace of perfection or completeness or all or nothing. Mm. It's the all or nothing or the seeking perfection. It's something that I've been debating actually getting tattooed at some point or another, because I need that fucking reminder on like my forearm that is perfection is the enemy of good.
Yeah, I had at one point to start allowing myself to just be proud of the little things that I accomplished. Mm-hmm. So if you're at a place right now where you are completely saturated in your depression, you feel absolutely worthless, you feel terrible, it takes so much to do anything. My recommendation is what helped me when I was in those states was doing just what I could. And if that meant if I just took a shower that day and I couldn't do anything else, I was proud of myself for, hey, despite how exhausted I was and despite how much everybody else is doing, because of course you compare yourself,
yep,
I'm doing this. Because listen, you can compare all you want. You have no idea how other people would cope with the depression that you are coping with right now.
Oh, of course.
So don't even throw it out the window. It doesn't matter. Celebrate the little things you do. Celebrate yourself by practicing, at least just starting to notice how much shit you tell yourself, mm-hmm, and how poorly you speak to yourself, and just start with that.
Keep track of those things that you're doing, by the way, in whatever way you feel comfortable doing, whether it's journaling, whether it's making little marks, whether it's getting a little whiteboard in your office that all you do is you just do little check marks like, I brushed my teeth already today. It may sound a little like juvenile or something that you'd have a kindergartner do, but honestly,
it can feel nice to check off things.
It feels nice, yeah.
And if the list is too hard to make, don't make the list yet.
Yeah, you don't have to. Yeah, do whatever you feel comfortable with. It's all about. I want to say challenging your comfort zone, but sometimes you just can't.
You start on a base level. You start low and you work your way up. Listening to a podcast is great. Watching YouTube videos that kind of inspire you, and just be gentle with yourself. 25% is okay. You don't have to be 100%.
Forgive yourself when you're starting out. Yeah. That's really the big thing here, is like when you feel so utterly hopeless and you start like kind of inching your way out of your little depression cave, you can have a moment where you just go, this doesn't feel good. I'm going to go back in. Yeah. And you can have those moments, but it's the fact that you stepped out, you tried. Yes. And that's really what's important.
And my therapist said, Lindsey, change is never going to be comfortable. It's not going to be comfortable at first. In fact, it might feel the opposite of good, because you're like, oh, but I'm changing bad habits. This should feel great. And at first it doesn't really, but after a while, it makes this enormous difference. So thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you guys, as always, for listening. Follow us on Instagram at HAYHU Podcast. Like our Facebook page. If you want to send us something directly, go ahead and email mailbag@HowAreYouHoldingUp.com. Visit the subreddit. We're starting to get some people on there.
We have hit over 10,000 listens, so thank you for that.
Yes, thank you guys so much. 10,000 total listens over 34 episodes. That is insane to us.
That makes us so happy.
Yeah, it's pretty great, guys. You are all the best. Whatever you're doing this week, go forth and kick ass.
Yes.
And as always, don't tell us to just get over it.